All right, thank you all for coming. We have an excellent guest speaker tonight, Mr. John Hallman. John Hallman is an active, long-time voice in all levels of Florida politics and is a veteran of advocating issues of liberty in the Florida legislature. John has served as the State Director for FreedomWorks, the pro-market organization, as well as the Deputy Director of Florida Stop Lawsuit Abuse. While in Tallahassee, John has represented such groups as Florida Taxpayers Union, Cut Property Taxes Now, and the Florida Campaign for Liberty. John teaches activist training schools and is a frequent guest on radio talk shows and has written numerous articles promoting the cause of individual liberty. John Hallman.
Hi, good afternoon. Just to start out, I'm going to not take up a lot of your time. You have some elections here and some bylaws to go over, so I just want to kind of give you some background on what's going on. And we talk a lot about what's going on in Washington, D.C., but state legislature in Tallahassee are passing laws every year that affect your individual liberty and your freedoms. And it's always been said that states can act as laboratories of freedom. So really the front line against an overreaching federal government is our state and our state legislature. So I really felt it was important. That's why I decided years ago to use my activism in Tallahassee because I used to go up there before I became a registered lobbyist, and I was just amazed at what goes on up there. It's amazing. You've always heard that lobbyists run the show and lobbyist influence, and it's amazing. They really do. And so what I realized was that lobbying is guaranteed in the Constitution. So we can say, get rid of all the lobbyists and they're destroying the country, but we're not going to get rid of them because it's in the First Amendment, your right to address the government for grievances. So it's not going to go away. So what I felt is I'll always go up there and spend my time in the session, speak at committee meetings, and talk about the principles of individual liberty. And it's something that we really need to define. I think we need to have this discussion, not only in the state, but the nation, about individual liberty. What is it? And it's, to me, it's the freedom to live my life and make my own decisions, to be free from force, which is government, and the only necessary amount of government that's needed is to protect that right. And that's it. That's it, to me. That's to me. So that's where I go up and advocate in Tallahassee. Everybody hears lobbyists and they start booing and hissing. But I just want to be clear that that's what I work for in Tallahassee. And that means that somebody asked me the other day, what laws when they come out or what bills will you oppose? And I said I start out opposing every one of them until they can prove to me that our individual liberty is protected. And I also, I'm a big believer in the Constitution. And there again, we have the 10th Amendment in the Constitution that says that the federal government is limited. And, obviously, Article 1, Section 8 actually lists the limits. And it said that it's limited, that it can only do this, and the rest goes to the state and the people. So I felt like, making sure they understand that there is a 10th Amendment. They don't understand. But they're learning. So anyhow, that's just a little bit of background on why I do it and why I go up there. Also, I just want to, back to individual liberty. This idea that is permeating both parties, this idea is that our only existence on earth is to serve others and self-sacrifice for the good, the collective good of society. And that to me, it's just, if that's true, because if that's true, then government's going to mandate it, and they're going to take away all our freedoms, and we all become slaves. If that's all I do, because that's what slavery is, you sacrifice your own labor and your talents for somebody else. And we got to start talking about that. And I think it was John Locke that said, if I cannot own from what I produce, then I am a slave. And so I think we need to have this discussion. I'm kind of harping on it a little too long here, but we got to start talking about individual liberty, what it means, and what the legitimate role of government is. And I'm having a hard time in Tallahassee. convincing it, but I do it. And I'm getting some of them to come around. Some are starting to understand it, and so I'm not pessimistic, I'm optimistic. It's going to take a lot of work, and that's why I wanted to come talk to you all today, so that I can get your help. Because I'll be there every day during the session and the early committee weeks, but I need your all's help to make the phone calls and the emails. So I hope you'll take some interest. You may have already in state policy, but so let me talk a little bit about the election results. The House of Representatives in the state is made up of 120 members, and the Senate, Florida Senate, is made up of 40. Now, before the election, the Senate was 28 to 12. 28 Republicans, 12 Democrats, which means they had what's called a supermajority, or 2/3 majority. And I'll talk a minute about why, what that means. And the House was 81 Republicans to 39 Democrats. Again, that 2/3 supermajority. So what happened in the election is the Republicans lost a net of 5 seats. So now it's 76 to 44. So it was, 39, now the Democrats have 44. So the Republicans in the House lost that supermajority. They no longer have that 2/3. And what does that mean? It's really a lot of, as you might know, there's rules and procedures, parliamentary and all that stuff, and how they operate in Tallahassee. And the 2/3 it's kind of, a neat thing to have if you're going for liberty, but some, they don't. But what it does is it allows you to, you can do different things with rules and procedures. You could pull a bill that's been sitting in a committee up into the floor and have a vote on it. And you can waive rules. If you have 2/3, you can waive rules. I make a motion to waive the rule. 2/3, all Republican, you have it done. Waive the rules, add late filed amendments. So it gets really into rules and procedures, but it's a pretty good thing to have. And the next level of that is 3/5. Now, in the House, they need to maintain 72. Now they got 76. Now they have so they have 76. They have to have 72 to maintain that next level of 3/5, which is an important one too. So that means that they lose 5 seats, they lose that. Okay? So that's sort of the next thing. And it's almost a duplicate in the Senate. And the Senate now lost its 2/3. It's got 26, and they need 24 to maintain. So they only have to lose 3 seats, and they lose that. So as I went through the election results, and y'all mentioned a couple of here that Republicans lost. I picked out 15 House districts that were solidly Republican, now are competitive. The Republican won by a much smaller margin. So that means there's, in the House alone, there's 15 that the Democrats are really going to go after, because that's where they're going to, make up that ground. And if they can even narrow the majority down to below 3/5, the Democrat Party will have a lot more say in the agenda, and they'll really slow down the Republicans. One thing again about that 2/3, once they lose that, so you can shut, like the filibuster in DC, they can shut down debate. So what Democrats can do is you want to run out the clock. You have 60 days to run through about 3,000 bills, and only a couple hundred survive and get passed. And so what you want to do if you're the opposing party is you want to run the clock out, drag out, debate, drag it out. And that way, even if the bill that you're dragging out gets passed, you're going to stop others. So, it's a lot of, gamesmanship up there and how they do it, and try to get some leverage and try to get some say into the agenda. But, so things have, really changed. Even with just this, with the small gains that the Democrats made, it's going to change how things are done. One thing I wanted to say is that I'm very disappointed, and I'm not here to bash the Republican Party. I'm just going to tell you the truth. This is what's happened. Republicans have had a supermajority or a pretty big majority for many years now. They were, for back in the 70s, going way back probably since Reconstruction, Democrats have run Tallahassee. And then it was they started making some gains, and then by 1996, they had that one vote, that one seat that carried them over, and they had a majority. And since then, they've been building on it. But what's happened is they got the power. And this is just, again, I'm not running the Republican Party down because the Democrats did the same thing. When you have power, power corrupts. Absolute power absolutely corrupts. And so, you know, it's just the truth. What they did is they lost their principles. And this is where y'all come in, is they lost their principles. They did. They voted for things like the Real ID Act and the red light cameras and citizens' government take over our property insurance. They raised taxes. They increased spending under the Jeb Bush years. And I love Jeb Bush on many things, but spending went through the roof. And they've raised taxes. And if you looked at a laundry list of the bills that they've passed over the last several years, you would have thought it was the Democrat Party in charge. But what they did was they wanted to stay in power. And there's another thing that they do, and when you research this, is they basically started to keep power, you have to have money. So they started selling legislation. You could buy a bill, you could buy a law. The great example is Sunrail. CSX, the train company, that had a sweetheart contract with the state, unbelievable sweetheart deal. They donated $500,000 over about a 2 or 3 year period while it was being debated to the Republican Party of Florida. $500,000. Not to mention the hundreds of thousands they gave to the Speaker's Leadership Fund, which is a slush fund for leadership in both parties to collect money, and they use that. So, you know, if somebody gives you $500,000, you've got to pay them back, and they got, so that Republicans went and voted for Sunrail. So, and the lady mentioned Agenda 21. And I was amazed, because I was working on property taxes and I was working on property rights, but the Agenda 21 was being fast and furious during the Charlie Crist years. It was unbelievable when I went back and pulled bills up. But it's continued on after Charlie Crist is gone. And these same Republicans that are complaining now were the ones that voted for it before. And so there is let me tell you something. When I first heard Agenda 21, I said, oh, here we go, black helicopters, conspiracy theory. And so I started looking into it. And it's for real now. It's the radical environmental move. And of course, Agenda 21 is from the United Nations. The Earth Summit in 1992 came out with these lists of recommendations to buy up, government to buy up as much rural land as possible, declare it wetlands, squeeze everybody into cluster communities, and have everybody connect these cluster communities by mass transit trains, and have bicycles, and get everybody out of their cars. And it really is true. And the Republican Party, and then last year they passed, Scott Blaken, who lost, sponsored a bill to give all kinds of Solyndra-style grants and tax subsidies if they go green. If you have a company that would go green and produce alternative energy, you got all kinds of favors from the government. Well, that violates our principles. So I guess my point is that we need to step up, and I need your help, and if we want to advance liberty, we need to, as Republicans, you need to say you're not acting like a Republican. And you've got to be able to tell them that. We can't just give them a pass, because we're going to continue to get this. And what's going to happen is the Democrats are eventually going to take over. Because they're going to gain, if all they got to do is gain 5 seats through the next 3 election cycles, and they own Tallahassee again. And the Republicans can only sit back and look back at all these bad bills that they passed and wonder why their supporters aren't out there. And so, what I would like to see everybody do is hold, we've always heard the expression, hold their feet to the fire, but we really got to. And that means Rick Scott. Rick Scott, to me, has done some good things, and he's done some bad things. So I want to call him out on the bad things, say thanks for the good things, but not be afraid to say, you did wrong, Governor Scott, on this. You were wrong. He could have stopped Sunrail. We got a group of attorneys together. If anybody knows Matt Falconer from Orlando, and we got attorneys and met with the governor, and we gave him legal options to actually could have, stopped Sunrail, basically nullified the Sunrail. Could have stopped it and chose not to, and I was very disappointed. He could have legally done it. He claimed, he had legal problems, but we had some of the best attorneys look at it and gave him the options. But anyhow, the other thing I wanted to point out, and I'll wrap up and take any questions, is there was 56 legislators that will be sworn in. There's 120 House and there's 40 Senate, so that means there's 160 legislators in Tallahassee. 56 of them will be sworn in the next couple of weeks that never received even one vote. They never received any votes. They simply won by filing. Nobody challenged them from any party. They didn't get a primary challenge. That freaked me out. Is that, I don't know, I looked at it and went, wow, you're kidding. 56, over a third, will go into Tallahassee and get their office space and be called senator and representative, never received a vote. Is that a democracy? A republic? That sounds like a banana republic to me, where dictators pick the candidates and we get no say. We don't have a say. And you can't vote for somebody. That doesn't make any sense to me. And the primaries. There was another, I think in the House, 98, between Democrats and Republicans, they didn't get a primary challenge. So no primary challenge. 56 of them just going straight from the filing at the supervisor elections and now just sat around and waited so they can be sworn in. And that's not right. So these are things, that y'all can do in the Republican Liberty Caucus, is, you run primary opponents. There's nothing wrong with that. Challenge the status quo. There's nothing wrong with that. Good competitive race is good. And so that should never happen again. 56 people should never be sworn into office that were handpicked. That's a banana republic, not a constitutional republic. So anyhow, I didn't mean if I offended anybody, and I've been up there for 10 years, so I get a little frustrated. But I wanted to share with you my observations, what I've seen, and then hope that we'll change things and we'll bring back principles of individual liberty. It's going to take getting better candidates up there, and that's where y'all come in. So, yes, sir?
I noticed you said, we lost a couple seats in the Senate, a couple seats in the House, and we all know we lost a couple, the Republicans lost nationally a couple seats in the Senate, and I actually don't know how many in the House, because I think they lost a couple in the House. But one of the things that the Liberty movement has celebrated is that we actually gained in the House, gained in the Senate of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of the Liberty-endorsed candidates. Can you tell us even though we may have lost Republicans, did we get any Liberty House or Senate members elected? Or
not really. There was
enough detail.
Yeah, I looked at all the races. Most of the incumbents won that were there from the previous have been there. So majority of incumbents won. Because of term limits, there's always some termed out legislators, and those seats open up. But all the incumbents that ran basically won. Getting kind of back to the incumbents win. They don't get challenged. And once they know that they don't have to reach out to voters, who they represent? They don't represent the voter. They're not listening to the voters. If they don't have a chance of being tossed out, that's the other thing I don't like. It's rarely. The fact that 5 incumbents lost this is alarming. That's should be alarming to the Republican Party. And so here's the big question. Those 15 seats I mentioned that are up for grabs for Democrats to take away from Republicans. Obama got reelected. So what is the Republican Party going to do? And anytime the Republican Party starts thinking about what they're going to do, it scares me. It really does. It scares me. So that, again, where you all come in is, principles of, let's define liberty, individual liberty, the Constitution, and because our natural rights, our right to own ourselves and our labor, is embedded into the Constitution. It comes from John Locke and Bastiat and, all those, and Jefferson, obviously, Madison. And we need to define that and say this is, and that's what I think Ron Paul did a fantastic job. He wrote a book called Defining Liberty. And we need to define it because that's the message that was winning the young people. They said Romney lost, big time to the young people. But a friend of mine was actually head of security for Ron Paul, John Beza, who lived somewhat in the area here. And John, he just told me, he said, John, the kids that are turning out for Ron Paul, these all around the country, said it's amazing. And I was in Tallahassee a couple of years ago when he spoke, filled up, FS filled this huge auditorium up. I mean, thousands of young people. And you know what? They were clapping as much on economic liberty as they were, obviously a lot of them are against the war on drugs and everything like that, but they were applauding as much on the economic, about the taxing too much and regulating too much. They were applauding just as much, and I was amazed to see the young people. It would encourage me. So Ron Paul's got a great message. The Republican Party chooses to accept it. I think it would help the Republican Party immensely, but I don't know. Like I said, I always get scared. Governor Scott and the incoming Senate President Don Gates and the incoming Speaker Will Weatherford you may have seen this, announced that they are now accepting Obamacare. They are no longer going to fight it. It's done. And there's no standing up. We're trying to find a way to protect us from Obamacare. They said it's done. So everybody can just go home and forget about it because they're going to find a way to adapt it and use it. Health care exchanges and the expansion of Medicaid, it's a done deal. So see why I'm worried? When the Republicans start worrying about, what direction should we go in?
Does FreedomWorks collaborate with other groups like Americans for Prosperity or the 10th Amendment Center? Or I know Americans for Prosperity has somebody in Tallahassee that tries to watch legislation when it's going through committee and then let people know. Do you guys work together?
Well, I'm no longer with FreedomWorks.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was their state director for about 4 years, 2002 to 2006 roughly. But actually Americans for Prosperity was created out of a division from what used to be Citizens for a Sound Economy. I was actually working for them when that split was happening. So I started out as Citizens for a Sound Economy, and then they had that big split between the foundational board and the Koch brothers, and they went over and started Americans for Prosperity. But, so there may be some tension there as far as personality clashes, but, as far as I know, they're both, pro-free market groups. Slade O'Brien is a real good friend of mine. We used to live in the same town down in South Florida.
I just like to see the groups work together and help educate people on, because a lot of people don't understand that when legislation is going through committee is really the only time that we have a chance to affect it. Once it hits the floor, you can make all the phone calls and emails to, I might be wrong.
No, I agree. In fact, I'll even say when a bill comes up in the committee to be heard, it's too late then. Okay, it's too late then.
All the backroom deals have been done.
The backroom deals have been done. I've never seen, and maybe somebody will disagree with me that's been there a lot, I've never seen, when we take a head count, we kind of know going into the committee meeting on the bill, and we take a head count, and I've never seen it change. The decisions were made, and it's not going to change. So even, speaking before a committee, I do a lot because I want it on public record. That's the only reason I'll go up and speak about individual liberty and whatever I speak about in the Constitution is only because I just want it on record. I realize I'm not going to change their minds at that point. I needed to change their minds beforehand, and sometimes I have been successful doing that, but it happens before the committee meetings even.
How do we find out what's going on before the committee meetings?
Well, I'll be putting out, if anybody wants, I have a legislative update email that I'll be putting out. I'll be up there, and I'll be updating, I'll be sending out, what I think are liberty bills, and anti-liberty bills. So if anybody wants to get on my email list, I know everybody's sick of the 10 million emails I get, but if you want, I try to keep it very specific, very targeted, and not a lot of fluff. And, I just want to tell you, here's this bill, here's what I think it means, and it could be a bad bill, and here's who you need to call, But I think you had a hand up.
Yeah, you had mentioned about putting Republicans' feet into the fire and saying they're not Republican, and it got me thinking that a lot of folks, especially as people rallied behind Ron Paul, had very adverse feelings towards Republicans. And I'd love to make a case about redeeming what Republicans are. And as a Christian, too, I find that with all my progressive Christian friends, they don't even call themselves Christians because of the connotations there. They say, you know, I'm a Jesus follower or whatever. And I really feel like that hurts the case of Christianity as we go to spread the message of love and acceptance and His salvation. And so as we move forward here and we try to define what Republicans are, I feel like we're going to have difficulty because the libertarian movement has often been, by many folks, maybe Republicans, as extremist because we're focusing so much more on limited government, which is, you know, attacking entitlement programs and whatnot. I find myself struggling with how we articulate it to those Ron Paul folks. I know a lot of you guys are here, which is great. That, you know, we need to work within the GOP and straighten them out and fix it, not you know, champion behind the idea of a third party, which I see a lot of my libertarian friends do, which I think is a lot of votes that we lost with Mitt Romney because he, by most people's definition, was a little moderate, which is the intention of the GOP when they nominated him, was to reach for that moderate vote. But we all saw what happened. He became the extremist when we got to the general election. And it's a lost cause, I think. That's one of the things I'm most fearful about when we move forward is what the Republicans are doing and trying to convince the public that we need to moderate our message a little bit so we can reach across the aisle. But I don't think that's going to accomplish anything because the Republicans are always going to be painted as this extremist view. And so,
well, it was Barry Goldwater that said defending liberty is not extremism, and moderating your views is not I forget the exact quote, but you know what I'm saying? It's otherwise pushing for individual liberty. That's all I talk about. And if that comes from the Republican Party, if it comes from the Democrat Party, that's fine. And third parties like the Libertarian Party, you know, I think the Libertarian Party can be competition for the Republican Party. Either if you see a lot of libertarians voting for a libertarian candidate and you think they should have voted for Romney, well then the Republican Party might want to rethink putting Romney up. You know, just to be honest. You know, so I don't see that as a problem. I'm for an all of the above kind of guy. I mean, you know, there's some theories about how you change government back towards a republic, restoring the republic, and some say you just gotta elect good people. Okay, and I agree with that. We gotta elect libertarian or liberty-minded people that respect the Constitution. You know, and to me, I don't care what party they come from. If you love the Constitution, you believe in the principles we've all been talking about. If you're a Democrat, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I know this is a Republican Liberty Caucus, and I've been a lifelong Republican, and I've been an executive committee man, and I've been on the board of directors, and I've been very involved. You know, I don't care. It's not about the party to me.
right. Well,
It's about my freedom and liberty.
And if I can add, though, too, what the Republican Party has become to a lot of folks that have become tired and weary of the bickering and the lack of progress is what's making it difficult to convince and articulate that we need to redeem the Republican Party, not make it more difficult for maybe I'm scared to say this because I might get yelled at, but the only hope really for restoring America is through the Republican Party, in my mind, and that if we deviate from that, we may be hurting our liberty. And not to say that the Republican Party is perfect, because we all know it's not.
Well, no party's going to be perfect, but I mean, you know, I'll take the drug war, for example. I don't do drugs. I have no desire to do drugs, and if it became legal tomorrow, I wouldn't just start doing it because it's legal. And I think anybody that wants to do something destructive to themselves, as long as they're not dragging somebody else with them, should be free to do it. As much as I disagree with it, I think drugs are bad, but I don't think the government, and if we don't, you know, that's individual liberty. That means if I want to go home and drink a bottle of bleach, I can do it. Now that's my freedom, and it may kill me, but that's that's liberty. You see, and to sit there and say, you know, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. We don't even have that, 5% of the population, 25% of everybody that's jailed in this country is right here in America. And we're taking kids, recreational users of marijuana, and we're throwing them in jail. Now, there's nothing moral or good about that. They shouldn't be doing drugs, I agree. But, we don't have a right to sit there and ruin their life, and they've got a criminal record for the rest of their life. They become, you want to talk about productivity, when you talk about everybody on welfare, how about everybody sitting in jail? How productive are they? What are they doing for us to increase productivity in our economy? So, that's something we have to have a discussion about, because I can tell you the Republicans are not, most of them are not accepting of the legalization of drugs. But I think we need to talk about it,
John, we're going to take one more question.
Okay.
And some time after for additional.
Okay. Who had, I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, trying to point out who we are as Republicans, I feel like there's this fear of being, don't promote conservatism.
Right.
And we're seeing that with Governor Scott and the leadership.
Yeah.
They're probably worried about re-election, obviously.
Absolutely.
But take it on the chin and do what's best for the people. And that's fighting, the exchange issue with Obamacare. And they're not doing it. So of course the voters are looking and saying, what's the difference between these guys? And I'm confused. But,
There's no guiding principle right now in the Republican Party of Florida, and I think nationally as well. And if you don't have guiding principles, when you start, Chris Dorworth, who was going to be a Speaker of the House, if you're all familiar with him, just got bounced out. And he was, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you the truth. The insiders up there, this guy was the biggest crook that's ever been in Tallahassee, and that's saying a lot. And this guy was selling everything to use his power to take money. The guy got rich, and that's not being a Republican, and that's not for liberty. And so those kind of people I'm glad Chris Dorworth lost. He needed to go. And I hope in the next time the guy that won is no fan of is not going to be an advocate for liberty, but let's get somebody in for next time.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry, we've got to continue on with meeting. We're going to have more question and answer time after we complete the bylaws and the election.
Okay.
I appreciate your time, and again, let's all work together. And if anybody wants to give me their email list or anything like that, I'll keep you informed of bills that are going through the state legislature. And if you can help me to agree with it, I try to do a lot of work with bill analysis and tell you what the bill's about. I try to give you a lot of information, so if you'd like to do that and help out with phone calls and everything else, I'd appreciate it. So thank you for your time.